another episode of Video Game Logic. Today's episode was recorded on May the 14th, 2019. I'm your host, Gaming Psychologist, and with me, as always, delightfully distracting...
Squirrel! Caffeine rage.
On today's show, we will of course be discussing the games that we played this week. A loot box ban bill is to be introduced by U.S. Senator Josh Hawley. A new Final Fantasy VII Remake trailer shows Aerith, Sephiroth in action combat. The U.S. Supreme Court says Apple can be sued for monopolization. We'll have our weekly community corner where we discuss that very long Our Games as Service fraud video that was sent to us by Jim about 2 weeks ago now. Timestamps will be in the show notes following their respective topics. Good evening, Rage.
Hello.
How are you?
What, you didn't figure that out in the, hour and a half, 2 hours we've been talking?
Well,
okay,
I mean,
that's a little bit more.
It's about an hour.
I'm doing all right. Had a little bit of a frustrating day, but that's just more... where I live, there's a lot of small restaurants, and they don't have enough food minions in the kitchen. Yeah, I ended up spending about half an hour at a Taco Bell to order a drink.
Yeah, I like Taco Bell and the pain which follows on the porcelain throne, but it's not even for me is it worth half an hour. You're a very obstinate man. Yeah,
at one point it became more of, okay, I've already been here this long. I want the survey code. I usually don't do the online surveys after a visit to a place like that. But as soon as I got home, I did one.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah, and it's the thing. There wasn't even that. There was 3 people that was waiting on mobile orders. And the thing is that they kept prioritizing the drive-thru that kept seeing cars come through. So they were skipping people that was in the store. So, yeah, I was there for quite a while, and I was being told, oh, don't worry, the cashier will be out in a moment. And it makes me a little concerned about the hygiene in this place, because the cashier came out, took my order, saw it was just a drink, and gave it to me, then went back into the kitchen to resume her food minion duties. Yeah, am I the only one that sees a hygiene problem here? Potentially.
Taco Bell's probably not all that concerned about hygiene, honestly.
True. I mean, hell, for quite a while, Taco Bell, everything was meat-free.
Yep. Full of sand, though. Full of sand.
No, it's spices. The spice and the diarrhea must flow.
Funny, but gross.
But hey, their freeze drinks are actually pretty damn good. Which was while I was there. Also, I was there at the Breaker 20 because I stopped at the ATM across the road from it. Because I needed to do some wallet restuffing.
Did that today. I stopped at Sonic and got some food just so that I could get some change.
Yeah, that was pretty much my sole reason there. Was just a Breaker 20 that I got out of the ATM. Because, the bus needs exact change.
Welcome to the not so helpful financial portion of the podcast.
Now, see, you do not invest in Taco Bell because they have this weird thing about fast food not being fast.
Indeed. Regular food would have been much faster than your fast food today.
I was starting to wonder if the particular flavor of drink I wanted would have been available because, they discontinue flavors after a month or so.
I see what you did there.
I was also starting to worry about, if the $20 bill I had in my hand was still considered legal currency. Because, they do retire bills after a while.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, but can't you actually still spend that money and then just the banks collect it once it winds up there?
Yeah, but people look at you kind of weird if you use really old currency.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
I mean, how many times have you seen stories about people being accused of being counterfeiters for using a $2 bill?
More than once.
And the fact that there is $2 bills is still kind of weird, but it's, from what I understand, actually related to horse racing.
Didn't know that. I've got a couple of $2 bills.
It was
somewhere.
a particular denomination for horse racing, if I recall correctly. Betting on horses. So it was big enough that it was a thing, and it's one of those things that is actually going to pop up later. That once a law goes onto the books, it's a lot harder to get it off the books.
Yeah.
So
that's
speaking of
interesting.
books, weird segue, but let's go with it.
Sure. Speaking of entertainment.
Well, so you want me to skip to the second game? Okay. We'll take the bad segue and go into Dauntless. Oh boy, Dauntless. This is a free-to-play Monster Hunter-esque game, and flavorless. Let's go with flavorless as an adjective on this one. It tries to do a lot, but it feels like it doesn't really have a character of its own, which is kind of weird considering the art style, because you would look at it and think, oh, this is going to be a wacky kind of fun adventure. No, not at all. I think my biggest problem with this game is its matchmaking, all right? So, Dauntless, it's Monster Hunter World. It's kind of a giant overworld, right, that you can traverse, right?
Yes.
To some degree. Dauntless, all matchmaking. All of it.
Okay.
You have the central hub, Rams Vest. No, they could ram it. But everything is in matchmaking. There's no overworld to try to traverse. It's all just floating islands out in the ether, all right?
Okay.
And to do anything is just convoluted and frustrating. So let's just dive right into the actual fights, all right? Like you would expect, you're going up against, what do they call them in Monster Hunter? Do they just call them monsters, or is there a particular term for them?
No, usually they're just referred to as monster or beast or creature or something like that. They
they're
do
all
have
behemoths.
a special. Okay, they do have a special term for them, but I don't it's like a lore related thing, and I can't remember it right now.
Yeah, and like Monster Hunter, the behemoths have various weak points, or not even weak points, but just different points that you could damage independently of one another. To lop the tail off to get extra loot, to damage sacks in the mouth for extra loot. But because of how they have the game balanced around groups, trying to do anything solo feels like it is so slow. Even though it's less than 10 minutes, just because it is so bullet spongy, and there is some visual elements of, okay, well, the tail came off, or there's now the creature has some scratches on it, but it doesn't really have the feedback that you would expect from taking a giant sword and whapping it upside the head of a giant monster a few times, right?
Okay.
And it made it feel like it was just so. It was bringing out the repetitive nature of it, which I realized these games, they are loot grinds. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy my loot grinds when they're fun. This was not fun. It kept pushing me towards, okay, well, you build up this weapon a little bit. Now you have to go do another one to progress the story a little bit. Well, I just got this weapon where it's actually decent so I can hunt something else. No, you gotta do something else. Or there's 5 different melee weapons, and there's one ranged weapon, which is a set of repeaters, pistols. In order to unlock any of the repeater stuff, you have to deal so much damage with them that it's just absolutely infuriating. Plus, the repeaters, by the time I unlocked them, were worse than any of the other weapons I had. So I was having to gimp myself to try to unlock ranged weapons, so I'd be a little bit better on some of the behemoths that take flight. And it just made no damn sense to me.
That sounds incredibly frustrating, because in Monster Hunter, like, as long as you have the materials to upgrade the weapon down whatever path you want, you can just skip all of that.
Let's see, there's 5 different main weapon types. There's giant sword, slightly more giant sword, giant axe, little saw things, and and giant hammer. Okay. I don't know the proper terms for them, don't really care, but each one has their own different styles. So, giant sword is like faster than very giant sword, right?
Okay.
And they each have their strengths and weaknesses, but also each weapon has different elemental types. So in order to like get the fire giant sword, where you have to go kill the fire monster, but in order to get that materials to be more effective against that, you have to like go kill the electric monster. But like I said, it's just the repetitive nature came out very quickly in this, to the point where it kind of off-put me. And that's not even getting into just how frustrating the crafting system is to begin with, because okay, you need the items, but also there's no centralized crafting location. You have to run around Ramit to find the various shops. There's no local map, and Carter gets the one of the few things that's not quest that shows up on your compass as icons,
where you can purchase things with the premium currency.
That's
or
one.
Loot boxes.
And where you crack open the loot boxes. So unless you memorize that damn place, you're wandering around trying to figure out, okay, now where is the shop again? And it doesn't have a good signing system on the damn buildings either, to figure out, okay, where do I go to like try to build a new sword, or go see what I need to upgrade the pistols. Because it's just it's one of those games that it's the free-to-play model done to the extreme. But once you take the free-to-play model away, it feels so bland.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listening to you talk about this just makes me feel like it's like, okay, so they copied the Monster Hunter sort of formula, took out all of the fun aspects of the loot sort of grind and gear grind, and made them terrible.
Yeah, pretty much, from what I can tell. So let me give you an idea of what a hunt is like. So let's go on a solo hunt. So I'll enter matchmaking, and now we wait. Yes, you actually have to wait, even if you're in solo mode.
You can skip that in Monster Hunter.
Not this. Well, there is some sort of thing that you can unlock later for paid currency, of course, to skip the line, but all right. I mean, fuck that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, wait a minute or two to get into the arena. Well, you also need crafting reagents for later. So if you're with a group, well, good luck, because you have to kind of fight a balance. Okay, do I want to go grab some of these things that I need for potions later, or do I actually want to be useful to my group? Which is also frustrating as hell, because all that is in the matchmaking as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Does it do that difficulty adjustment thing, or is the game clearly designed for groups, and if you try and go it solo, you're at a clear disadvantage?
It feels like it's a combination of both. It feels like you're at a clear disadvantage solo, especially against some of the more annoying monsters, even earlier on. But there's a definite HP bump in groups. Oh, and also, might I add, you know how most PC games have push-to-talk?
Yeah.
This one does not. And I swear half the population of this game are Twitch streamers, because I constantly got someone that was narrating their entire fucking fight.
That would be infuriating. There's no way to disable voice chat, or
you can but in order to disable it per person, you have to drop to the menu, and your group just left you behind because they're off running to grab the monster.
Oh, so you can't just like go to global voice chat and set it to 0.
I think there's an option to disable voice chat altogether, but it's one of those things that it's just so stupid that it's this way to begin with that warrants mentioning.
Gotcha.
Plus, the only way to communicate outside of that, because there were a few people that were actually useful in voice chat. And with this game, that's disabling voice chat for a cooperative game feels like an oversight. Like it's gimping yourself intentionally.
Yeah, but I would do that anyways. I always disable voice chat. I don't care. Although most of the time I don't play multiplayer games, but...
Anyway, try to grab some of the crafting reagents, which it's push and hold, which I absolutely hate. To interact with anything. It's the No Man's Sky method, which gets old quickly. But okay, get into the fight, and might I add that a lot of the group monsters, or I should say the daily patrols, because there's a matchmaking for daily patrols that gives you the orbs that you need to upgrade your equipment, and then there's the actual quest ones that are completely different. So all the group patrols at 50%. They skedaddle, and you have to go find them again. So it kind of breaks up the entire fight, I mean, every single one did that. And that got old quickly. Especially since there's no real movement abilities whatsoever. And because this is, a more momentum-based tactical fighter... Well, I mean, it's the Monster Hunter game, so, you expect combat to be weighty. And I'm trying to avoid saying a certain game in this. Because you know what I'm thinking, but it's that style,
Uh-huh. I'm trying to put that together in my head. I mean,
how you have to chase down the monster twice on a patrol, but still have very slow movement.
Yeah. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, and the tracking
sounds very boring.
And the tracking mechanic is it's pretty much scatter and go look for it and hope that the person that finds it has the wherewithal to use the emote that sends up this giant firework, which thankfully is unlimited use. And that's your tracking ability. There is the lantern, which is essentially a sort of consumable that you kind of build back up energy for. But you want to hold on to that because that's also your starter shield. If you don't have energy for that, you're going to be taking health damage the entire time. So, you kind of don't want to use that, right?
Yeah. No.
And also, if you upgrade that lantern at all, there's... only 5 different lanterns. That's the thing, is that this game feels like it's missing about half its content, because it only has, and I realize only, 20-some, 30-some monsters total. It has the 5 weapons, and each one of the main... there's only like 1 or 2 for each element, and then you have to upgrade them. So it feels like a incredibly shallow Monster Hunter that has a loot grind to it, or I should say a battle pass grind to it, because of course they have a battle pass in it on top of loot boxes, right?
Of course.
And a free-to-play store. So
you obviously you can't see my face, but I'm just like making this face and like shaking my head, like, yeah, of course it does.
Like you just bit into a lemon?
Yeah. Except somehow more sour. and bitter.
Also, in other words, how I feel about the game. Because
Yeah.
I originally tried to play it, and I'll give it the benefit of the doubt on this because it was early alpha. It was having some severe performance problems. Don't get me wrong, it's still having some severe performance problems, but I'm able to actually pull 60 FPS now pretty steadily outside of town, which towns in these games are always more detailed anyway, so they go for the visual flair instead of a very solid frame rate because they're not doing combat in it. So, I forgive that. Or I shouldn't say forgive, I overlook it.
Gotcha.
But it's just so many little things on it. The potion system is annoying because in order to craft your potions, you have to go on particular hunts and try to find the reagents, or I should say the items to craft them. But if you're in group matchmaking, well, you're not really going to be able to scour the thing. Oh, and there's a time limit. Of course there's a time limit, right?
Yeah, of course.
There is a half-hour time limit per fight. So if you run out of time, well, you lose. Quite simple as that. So, there's a constant time pressure that for some people it may, make more exciting, but for me it just makes it more frustrating because, okay, well, I need a bunch of items to be able to craft my potions to try to do something more high level. And also I need items to be able to craft my gear, and that's doing the monster in a very particular way, like knocking its tail off in a certain amount of time gives extra loot, because of course it does, right? But good luck doing that if you're solo.
In a certain amount of time? Not just at all?
Yeah, well, there's both. So a good example of this is pretty much every monster you can knock its tail off. All right? Well, some of the monsters have a challenge mode that if you knock their tail off or do a certain challenge in a certain amount of time, it also gives you extra loot, which strongly encourages group play, doesn't it?
Yeah, it also sounds like it encourages rushing, which gets old.
And is completely counterproductive to getting items to be able to do the damn crafting.
Yeah. In Monster Hunter, there is one type of hunt that is timed, but there's no, bonuses or anything like that. It's just this monster is in a specific whatever for X amount of time. Quick, you can go hunt it. And it's sort of like a challenge mode, almost.
Well, to be fair, in this game, there is only one type of encounter, or one type of behemoth that's timed. It's called all of them.
Right. It's probably a pretty prolific monster type, though, if it's, all of them.
Well, it popped up every so often.
Gotcha.
But beyond that, all right, something else that it felt like a lot of the monsters were kind of copy and paste. The first three behemoths, I should be using the proper term because I don't want to dirty the name monster. The first three behemoths, okay, they're the same body. One is essentially just a recolor with a giant fin put on the back. And the other one has the front legs swapped out for little bitty claws. And if that's the character design that they're going for on your initial, play session to try to hook you, it makes me wonder just how lazy they are once they got you, right?
Yeah. Pretty lazy, I would assume.
Oh, but to be fair, they did do a palette swap on them. The fire one was red and the electric one was blue.
Yay?
Yeah. Can you tell I
so
didn't enjoy
creative.
this?
Yeah, I think I can tell. It's coming through just a little bit.
Okay.
But I know you very well, so I can pick up what you're putting down. Yeah, the subtle undertones though might not be discernible for a general audience. So.
Yeah, it's just there is one system that I found interesting, which was the orb system. But the thing is, it's tied to the loot boxes. So, it's tied to that randomness. So the loot boxes have a possibility of dropping the ingredients. So, the people that played long enough, will have the ingredients just through loot boxes, but they also have augment orbs, or can't actually recall exactly what they called them, but orbs, all right? And you're able to swap them in and out freely. So that's something that's nice, that they're not tied to that particular weapon. But they could do, fairly mundane things like just adding flat damage, or, making it so that if you hit a certain amount of times in quick succession, that it does the bonus damage. But then they start adding more interesting things like dodging a monster attack grants a bonus damage for a short amount of time. If you get low health, you start gaining more and more armor until you start doing lifesteal. So it encourages a more berserker-style mechanic where you're trying to get lower health to trigger this on top of other orbs that do similar effects but grant more attack power. And there's a lot of interesting things that they could throw into this. But the thing is, because it's tied to that loot box system, it's infuriating because, you only get a few and you don't really get to pick and choose. There is some sort of synthesis thing going on that you could kind of combine them, but it wasn't really explained all that well. That's the thing also, is this game doesn't explain its systems very well. There's a lot. That
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, like there was this thing in the upper right-hand corner that I couldn't quite figure out. It had a percentage counter that kept ticking up. Well, it turns out this is the danger level. If it hits 100%, you're no longer able to be revived, and the monster starts hitting harder. So, don't want to do that. And it takes up over time. Also, if you take damage, you increase it, but if you make the monster run away, behemoth, I keep using the term monster. If you make the behemoth run away, it takes a bit off of it. So it's also a timer. So you're dealing with 2 timers.
And that is too many.
Oh. I mean, I really wanted this to be pretty decent, but there's just so much that angers me. I mean, they pretty much throw you onto the loot grind right away. In order to get your first decent set of armor, you're having to just grind out that first monster over and over again. Or just get carried by groups on others, and then you got people yelling at you. And that's the other thing, is that it seemed like I was hitting... Maybe I just had bad luck, but I kept hitting people that were narrating their entire hunt. I mean, it wasn't even funny. It was streamers. If somebody was doing like a Steve Irwin impersonation, fine. But no.
Oh, he's angry. Right.
Or the people that were on like Discord and they were talking to somebody that was in a different hunt. That was also another one I kept hitting.
Yeah, that would be one too.
But I kept hitting people that were kind of jerks because, why aren't you wearing better armor? I've been playing this for an hour. And I actually had people that left because of that. And because, health is set to your initial group, well, I was left to either struggle through or quit myself. And lose all the progress and, more importantly, all the ingredients I've picked up. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan. And the fact that they just announced, literally after I installed it, out of disgust, that it's going Epic Game Store exclusive, well, nothing of value is lost.
Yeah. That does not sound good, like a good game. It just, hearing you talk about it kind of makes me just want to go play Monster Hunter, because Monster Hunter's,
well, after playing it for a while, it's like, maybe I should try Monster Hunter instead. Assuming that I could get it on a good sale. It's just one of those things that... Actually, I don't even know how much Monster Hunter is these days.
It's $60. I just checked.
Oh, they haven't dropped the price at all?
No, it doesn't look like it.
Well, that's disappointing, but yeah. Let's put it this way: there were people talking about on the store on the store announcement page or thread in the subreddit how little they've added over the course of the year that the game's been out. They've added 4 behemoths in a year. That seems rather paltry for a free-to-play game, doesn't it?
Yeah, unless there's a bunch of other stuff that they added, but if that's
Not really.
all they've
They
added,
focused more on their monetization, adding they're on their 4th battle pass in 6 months. Just let that sink in. They're going through a battle pass in a month and some change.
yeah, I guess the ones for Fortnite last for, is it 3 months? It's more than a month. Which, I mean, nobody necessarily has to do that, but that's sort of set the trend.
Actually, hang on. Let me make sure on this. So, they're season 1. All right, they're on season 4. Okay, ran from December 6th, 2018 to January 9th, 2019.
So a month.
Yeah, a month and some change, like I said. So it's not even 6 months. We're talking 5 months. And it's not even using the Fortnite model, where if you buy into it and you complete it, you're able to essentially get the next one for free because there was enough paid currency in it. Nope. You get about half your currency back. And they have a skip mechanic that you could also buy into.
But wait, there's more.
It makes julienne fries. Yeah, if you're coming up to the end of the battle pass, you could throw in another 400 of the paid currency to be able to skip to the next level. Mind you, to unlock the track, it's 1,000. Am I the only one that thinks that that's a little bit much?
No, that seems like too much to me also.
So, they're going hard monetization. They're not adding a lot. From what I could tell, they've added the repeaters, which is a pair of pistols. And the pistols themselves, they're essentially a set of components that you throw together instead of a series of weapons like the other weapons are.
Mm-hmm.
Which are frustrating because the other weapons, if you wanted to skip a particular weapon, you could, because you could just go hunt the other ones, but there's no real skipping mechanic. All the weapons are essentially ballpark the same power, but leveling them up by using the orbs that you get in the daily patrols, which that's where a lot of the grind comes in, or I should say the initial grind, because I don't know late game grind. And also there's 4 different types of orbs, because of course there is. Skipping those weapons you technically could, but there's no real benefit because you're still going to need the fire weapon to deal with the behemoths that are weak to fire. You're going to need the thunder weapon to deal with those. But the pistols, yes, you could build up something initially, but it requires rare drops, and to get anything beyond the barrels, which is your elemental type, you have to complete the quest, which is dealing an absolute ton of damage to behemoths, so you're gimping yourself for quite a while to use that. It's just stupid. This is some of the worst free-to-play mechanics I've seen, and I've been playing mobile games lately.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a good game overall. It just makes me want to play Monster Hunter. Because Monster Hunter is a good game. It's got its problems for sure, but it's a good game.
Yeah, I imagine it's fun for more than 5 minutes, like this one is.
Oh yeah,
because that first fight's pretty interesting because it's your initial tutorial fight, and then they introduce, okay, now go fight this one, and this is essentially the same monster model, but with one extra mechanic to it, or one different mechanic, I should say, not even extra mechanic. So it'll do a different attack. And then the third one is essentially the same model as the first, only recolored with a fin on the back. Or I may have the second and third ones backwards, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
Greatly disappointed. And I was aiming low on my expectations for this game. I wanted to try it out just to, because I never really played Monster Hunter. But yeah, Trying to think if there's anything else that I'm missing. Not really. I mean, it does the annoying type of battle pass where, it has the, you run around town for all the dailies instead of actually doing something, which is, yes, the Warframe one got a little annoying after a while when they started asking for, just obscene things, but at least got you playing the damn game. It didn't have you going around petting dogs or hunting for fire pits in town. Yeah, not a fan. I'm sure that's come across by now.
Indeed. It does. So what else you got?
So I got a mobile game because, I'm still on my mobile kick. Spellsword Cards Origins. And, how to put this? This is actually pretty damn good.
Okay.
All right. It has the initial install is essentially the demo mode. It unlocks 2 of the 5 different races, 2 of the 8 or 9 different classes, and all the different paths, which I'll explain what those are in the different in a little bit. And to unlock the full game, it's $2. And I unlocked the full game just to try it out. And there's some actually interesting things going on here. So let's just go with character creation right away. This is Slay the Spire. There's some of the of this type of game as well on mobile, but it's a deck builder. If this was on Steam, it would have roguelite on it, and also psychological horror because everything is psychological horror on it in Steam.
Right. Makes sense.
But you're essentially on a quest to try to defeat a lich, and you go through 4 areas, and you're you're fighting baddies, leveling up, and building up your deck. And the interesting thing about this is, there's 2 interesting things about the card mechanic to begin with. One is it has a discard mechanic that it enables you to grant yourself extra movements or extra actions. So this is one of those weird CCGs, or actually not CCGs, but deck builders, that having a very lean deck may not be the way you want to play this, because having a lot of card draw and having a few cards that you could toss at any point is actually a tactical advantage because you're giving yourself more actions by discarding excess cards. And this is also one of those that it doesn't discard your hand when your turn is through. So you're actually able to build up a fairly sizable hand to be able to do a big turn. But also, it has a segregation on its spell system and its melee system. So melee is ran off the action points. So more melee-focused characters, warrior, the ninja, trying to think of what else, the rogue, and the ranger, are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. You want to build up a more sizable deck where you have options to discard to be able to grant yourself more actions to do a lot more attacks in a single string, especially with certain equipment that may modify your character. But more caster characters, the mage, there's a paladin that's kind of a mixture of the 2. There's a cleric that is also a caster, of course. Is having those excess actions is useful, but the spells are ran off mana, which does not regenerate. So you have to either have equipment that regenerates your mana, or have cards that regenerate your mana, which requires a more card draw, but not so much of an action-oriented deck. So there's actually 2 different ways to play this, just on the 2 different types of classes, before you even start getting into the nuances of the different classes. And like I said, I think there's 9 or 10 different classes. There's one that's still in being built. The game is technically, I would call it early access, but not really. There's one class that hasn't been introduced yet that's still in the building phase, the monk. But each class has their own nuance. Like warriors, as you discard, you also heal. yourself a little bit. So that encourages a more card draw and discard heavy deck. The Rogue has a combo system built into him. The Necromancer has an ability that as you deal as you cast spells, you build up essentially a counter that resets. Rangers have the ability to summon arrows and put them into their deck that gets a multiplier off of a quiver mechanic that's built into their class. So each of the classes has a very different feel to them before you even start getting into the kind of the random nature of building your own deck and seeing what you get, which I really enjoyed. And also, you can modify these by picking different races and different paths. So each run, you have 4 abilities. You have 2 out-of-combat abilities and 2 in-combat abilities. And that's dictated by your race. So, actually, it's a combination of your race and your class. So, there's something going on there that I haven't quite figured out yet. So, like the Paladin. No, it is class only. Sorry. Race is your passives, which is something else entirely. So, a Paladin has the ability to upgrade their card for free every 6 battles out of combat. And also, would be able to go into combat with extra mana or something like that. I can't remember the second Paladin ability. The Mage has the ability to go into combat with extra mana as well, and may be able to draw an extra card or something. Yeah, something along those lines. I can't recall the out-of-combat abilities right off the top of my head, unfortunately. But also in combat, which are separate timers, I might add, all 4 of the abilities are. The Mage may have the ability to, if you have, it does a arcane bolt that is multiplied by the number of cards that you have to do just an obscene amount of damage. They can only use once every 6 battles or something like that. Which also adds, like I said, to a bit of how you want to play them, but also you can kind of ignore them if you want. It's not necessary to beat the game. The one time I beat the game, I actually didn't use the abilities until fairly late, so it's not as of a requirement, but it does make life a lot easier if you build towards them. But the races dictate the passives, and that's passive combat abilities and also stat abilities. This is a deck builder RPG. So if you take a dwarven mage, you're going to have a harder time because dwarves aren't as magically focused as the elves are. Or the half-dragon race that's in this. So building up your class and your race could both hinder you or help you. So humans are, once again, the jack of all trades, master of none. So they're okay fit for every class. But taking a dwarven rogue is interesting. Has an interesting interaction in that the dwarves, because they're shorter, have an innate block mechanic. Every at the end of their turn, they generate 1 block charge that negates 1 physical damage, no matter what. So you can see how some of the interactions come into play. And then there's paths, which are a modifier to the deck. So the Path of Nature, for example, has a lot of focus on poison cards, but also a lot of healing cards. The red path, of course, would be fire. And you could also tune these. So if you take a path that has a lot of spells, well, you took a warrior that's also a half-orc, which has pretty much no mana whatsoever, so you're screwed. But if you take one that is more focused on actions, the light path has kind of a mixture of both, well, you could ignore the spells that you get unless you get lucky with an equipment card that you get that generates a lot of mana, and try to tailor your deck around a particular style of play. And also, once you beat the game, the path, the race, and the class that you beat the game with gets a small difficulty multiplier. I'm not 100% sure how that works exactly. But, like, let's say I took I think the race I took was Demon Spawn Warlock with the Death Path. So, I am become death, right?
Right.
Well, if I take that particular combination again, it'll be a lot more difficult. But if I take, like, a human warrior with the Death Path, which has a lot of necrotic damage, it has a lot of discard mechanics, a lot of milling, essentially. It's a little bit more difficult than if I took a human warrior with a fire path. But it's not overly difficult, so it's tuned a little bit. But if I keep using that same path over and over again, or that same class, or that same race, I'm going to make things a lot more difficult on myself, which is an interesting way to try to tune the difficulty mechanics, in that, it's trying to force you into playing multiple paths, multiple races, and multiple classes, instead of just focusing on what you're comfortable with, especially once you start beating the game more than 1 or 2 times.
It sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really tempted to download it myself.
Well, the demo is free. No ads in it whatsoever. Paid, I think it was $2 to unlock it, to get all the other stuff. It's definitely It's definitely worth at least downloading the demo mode to give it a try. I will say that I'm a little concerned about how things balance out in the long run because of how they segregate the physical damage and the magic damage. But it also has some very interesting things like, particular combinations feel very overpowered, but I think that's also by design. Where the one time that I beat the game, and I actually came close a couple other times, so it's not, a fluke thing. Or at least in theory. The Warlock I took got very lucky on getting a lot of cards that remove actions from the enemy and causes them to discard cards in hand. And also start stuffing their deck with cards that replace their cards and damage them when drawn. So you can see how things could kind of snowball with that particular combination, huh?
Indeed.
So what I was doing to the final boss was I would cause him to discard his entire hand, essentially, or close to it, as I could, and I packed their deck with a bunch of skeletons to, as they drew them, well, it exhausted the skeleton, which is gets it, they discard it, essentially, or I should say, remove it from play. But they don't get a replacement card. So it limits the computer's options. And there's one other interesting thing about this is that, well, there's actually a couple of interesting things. You may notice on these screenshots, especially I believe that's the second. No, that's like the fourth one. You have 3 options at all times until you're towards the end of the area. Each area has a total of 20 encounters, I believe. There's monasteries that allow you to discard 1 card for free. Then the second card's 10, the third is 20, and so on. It keeps ramping up. Blacksmiths allow you to upgrade. There's training grounds that allow you to combine different cards, and that's any card, but it also has a downside to it. So, like if you combine 2 high-cost cards to play, well, you just made a card that you may not be able to play it at all. But if you combine 2 cards that are, extremely useful together, it allows you to try to combo things a lot easier. But same thing, first time's free. The first hit's free, kid. And then it starts ramping up in price. But the interesting thing is that you're able to skip encounters. So let's say, that Darkling. Well, that Darkling's a bastard. I'm not in a good position to fight it. Well, I could just skip it. I could just say, I don't want to fight that. But I'm also giving up the experience I'm given, or I would get in that fight. So there's a trade-off here. And every time you level up, depending on your class race combination, you gain skills and stats. So you may, like an elven mage may get a lot of mana to start off a fight with. Which you can go over that mana cap, by the way. and that's just your initial mana. So, like this particular screenshot, I can't tell what class this is, but they start off with 14 mana, 2 actions, and they draw 4 cards per turn. Well, different classes and different races get different stats. So your next level up, you may gain another action, another card draw. But also, on each level up, you get a choice of 2 cards, or you could say, I'll take a random stat upgrade, which can be helpful or can be hurtful. Or I should say, it's not really hurtful, but it's not beneficial. It's just kind of a neutral upgrade. But you could do that to skip cards that are particularly nasty. Like there's some that whenever you draw, they're automatically played. There's some that would just sit in your hand and you don't want to deal with them, and you have enough discard cards. Like I said, it's an interesting twist on the deck builder mechanics. The fact that they're trying to play into the idea of, you don't have to have a very small deck. Large decks can work. Especially with some of the classes that get just an obscene amount of card draw through both class abilities and card mechanics. I will say probably my biggest complaint about the game is that the cards themselves, well, you can see on one of the screenshots, it's just an icon and how much it costs to play it and what level that card is. It doesn't give any information whatsoever. And in order to figure out what a card is that you aren't familiar with, you have to tap and hold on it, which slows down things. And the same goes for an enemy, is that if the enemy plays a card that you don't recognize, well, you have to look for it in the tracker, and the tracker only holds so many. And towards the end of the game, card turns start to get a little obscene. Finding the Lich on my winning run, I was going through 2/3 to 3/4 of my deck per turn, just doing massive card draw, massive discard, playing a bunch of cards, and having that many cards in your hand makes it very hard to tell what things are until you start tapping and looking, and that does slow down gameplay quite a bit. That's my biggest complaint about it. It's just how much a large hand could really slow down things. So, that's a minor complaint in my opinion. That's something that you could probably get used to, or maybe fixed later. Or the fact that maybe they could do it where it's played in portrait or in landscape mode instead of portrait mode. But it looks like they're sticking with portrait just because of the art. And also, there's not a lot of animations. There's some, but but I really had fun with it.
Yeah, sounds really good. Sounds like it's up my alley.
The fact that I give a glowing review to a mobile game, right?
It's happened a couple of other times before.
Yeah, I mean, Galaxy Truckers, I think, was the last one.
Yeah.
But those are also both premium games.
Well, I've got about $10 on my Google Wallet from surveys I've been completing the last month or so.
Well, Google made the mistake of asking me how I like Taco Bell when I got home.
Not too good. Alrighty. Well, is it my turn?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else really. Only other thing I could really think of is that maybe in time there's you'll hit a kind of a brick wall on just how much content's in the game. Oh, it's $2.99, not $2, so $3. But as you progress through the adventure, you have a choice of 1 or 2 areas each time, and each area has different creatures, so it does vary a bit. Plus, different class race path combinations does vary things up quite a bit. And I will say that the starting hero screen, it doesn't really portray that. Oh, well, you could tap and scroll those, because if you look at the class menu, it doesn't show it. So they could do something to fix that.
Okie dokie.
But it feels like I'm nitpicking at this point, doesn't it?
A little bit. I understand, because I do it too, but yeah, a little bit.
but I can't not complain. It's in my blood, man.
It's very true. Very true.
Hey, don't you say that about me.
Well, I'm going to do a little bit of complaining. Not too much, but a little bit about my game. Which, the only game I played this week that's new, but I did play quite a bit of it, was Mario Party 10 on Wii U. So I've had this game, or we've had this game, for months now. I can't remember if we got it for Christmas or even earlier than Christmas last year. But the intent was like, the intent was like, oh, we'll get this. King's, old enough to play some games now pretty well. We'll get him into this. It's something we all sit down and do as a family. And we were digging around looking for some stuff and found it in the cabinet. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot we got this. So popped it in, and Katie and I played for like 2.5, 3 hours for date night Wednesday night, and then we played some more on Sunday when we got home from my parents' house, which we went to for Mother's Day, and then played some yesterday, and then played some today. So for anyone who doesn't know, Mario Party is sort of a board game, combination board game, mini game style game, where you roll some dice, you move around the board, depending on what spaces you land on, things can happen. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, and lots of mini games. Almost every turn, or every sort of round, which is everybody going one time, like almost every round has got a mini game in it. And there's been all kinds over the years that, utilize different features based on what console they're on, or what console the game is on, or whatever. I mean, that's the gist of it. You play Mario characters. There's a goal, although this one is quite a bit different in a few ways from previous Mario Party games that I've played. The last Mario Party game that I played, I believe, was Mario Party 5, maybe 6.
How am I supposed to know this?
I'm looking up right now. No, it wasn't even Mario Party 5, because that was on the GameCube. Oh, geez. So the last Mario Party game I played was actually Mario Party 3. That was the last one that was on the N64. So I thought I had played more, because I owned and played all 3 on the N64. And actually, I've played one of the other Mario Party games in there in the middle, but I don't know which one, because I played it in my college dorm, I don't know, in 2010 or 9, somewhere in the middle of my time in undergrad. But anyways, they're all roughly the same, and the minigames change, and they add or remove small features here or there to sort of shake it up a little bit, and the character roster changes a little bit. But otherwise, it's basically the same game. So with Mario Party 10, with it being on the Wii U, the 2 things that the 3 things that they're going for, trying to utilize are sort of this asymmetric style of play for one of their game modes, and then utilizing the extra screen on the tablet thingy to do different things during the game. That's the 2 main things that they're doing from a console perspective. And then there's a lot of motion controlled stuff, although I would assume that had been in there since whichever Mario Party first released on the Wii. The fundamentals of the game have changed a bit for this one, although I hear they've changed back. So in Mario Party 10, and from what I was reading up, it seems like they did this in Mario Party 9 as well. Instead of everybody being separate characters on the board, everyone is in sort of a shared vehicle. There are different types of trains or carts or whatever based on sort of themed to whatever map you're doing in Mario Party 10. But everyone just takes turns from within the vehicle, and whoever's turn it is gets to decide, if there's a fork in the path or whatever. You get to decide which way to go, and then everyone is just on that path now. There is some interesting strategy to that, because there are areas that are going to have more negative things on the board, or stuff that, there are these little gates that you run into that give you mini stars, which are this game's equivalent of coins. But there's also ones that take them away. So you can set yourself up where that you'll avoid one, but the next person, or one of the next people to go, is definitely going to get hit by it and lose some stars. So
Also,
there's
another
some
dick move.
yeah, there's some interesting strategy to it, but it also makes it a lot easier for a very small child to play because there's really only one thing to worry about. You're not trying to keep track of and make a whole bunch of decisions about where your specific character is going and what you're going to do. There's pros and cons to it. It does make games a lot shorter as well. In the older Mario Party games that I've played, you kind of set how many rounds there were going to be. And like I said, a round is everybody gets to take a turn. So you could do, if I remember correctly, anywhere between like 10 and 30 rounds. And a 10-round game might last 20, 25 minutes. A 30-round game is going to last between 2 and 3 hours. Every single one of these that I've played so far only takes about 30 to 45 minutes. Depends on exactly how many additional random minigame spaces that you land on. It's very easy for a kid to pick up and play. My kid loves it. Some things he finds a little more boring, like the puzzles that have to do more with, or the minigames that have to do more with sort of puzzle solving, or doing things like playing a matching game or whatever to defeat like a little boss enemy, or to just generally win one of the more, they call them head-to-heads, where that it takes your stars out of your pool and like makes the winning pool out of for everyone. It takes 5 or 10 of everyone's mini stars to create the pool for the victors. Those are usually something that require a little more skill and concentration, so that the sort of better player has a better chance to win, because Mario Party is full of randomness. But that's kind of part of its charm. But anyways, aside from those types of games, my kid has picked up on everything fairly quickly and easily. It allows you to practice the mini games before you actually do them. So we, do a practice round or two before everything, and after that, he's usually got it. And he's even won a few of them, like outright. Not like, oh, I'm going to let him win. But no, he's actually outright won a few of the mini games. So it's definitely pretty easy for small children to pick up and learn. He also doesn't like any of the mini games that have to do with the motion controls, because it's the motion controls are inconsistent. And as an adult, you can kind of learn how to deal with it, but children have a much more difficult time dealing with things that are inconsistent. And so he gets really frustrated trying to do anything with the motion controls, unless it's just point an object on screen and press, when you're pointing at it. Those work fairly well. But anything that involves like shaking the Wiimote or turning it in one specific direction or trying to follow, because there's one that's like follow the pattern. It's kind of like a Simon Says type deal with the Wiimote. You've got to like move it around in the right way and push the buttons at the right time, but it doesn't always track your movement correctly. As an adult, you can just kind of be like, well, that sucks, and then move on. But he's like, no, this isn't fair. I don't get it. And so aside from those, he likes the mini games, and like I said, has even won a few of them. Some other sort of Wii U unique features. So using the little tablet thingy, there are some second screen things going on. If you're playing the standard game, Bowser is trapped in like a prison, and once all 6 numbers on the die have been hit, he breaks free of prison and comes out and starts terrorizing players on the map. And that's all, like, you can see all of that on the...
Also, in other words, Peach was asking for it by rolling the dice.
Pretty much. But you can see that and keep track of that on the tablet. There's a game mode. So I guess I'll get from sort of the standard stuff to some more of the specific stuff. There's a game mode called Bowser Mode, which is an asymmetric multiplayer mode. And one player plays as Bowser and uses the tablet, and the other 4 players use Wiimotes and play on the TV. And Bowser's trying to catch the other players by rolling better dice than them. And whenever he catches them, it forces like these battle mini games. And
I thought you were saying he's gonna fuck them.
That comes after he reduces their hearts to 0.
Ah.
And then he has his way with them. But yeah, the objective is Bowser is to defeat all of the opposing players in mini games and reduce their health to 0 before they escape, and you win. I've kind of toyed around with that mode a little bit, but you definitely need a full party to play that, the AI is just too stupid. Even on higher difficulties, they're just too slow and dumb to make it fun. And then there's something called the amiibo mode, which, amiibo, remember those things? I think they still make them, but I haven't heard anything about them in a while. But anyways, if you have any of the amiibo for characters that are in the game, you can use those in this amiibo mode. And it plays much more like the classic board game, or the classic Mario Party sort of board game, where that each of the amiibos are moving around on the board, almost like Monopoly pieces. And
you're
mini
just
games.
At the will of the dice in that, right?
Yeah. But anyways, it's cool if you want to play the more classic mode with some friends or whatever, because you don't have to have amiibo. If you don't have any amiibo, it just uses like generic looking human cutout things.
Yeah, but why would
like
you
a
want
cardboard
that?
cutout? Because I don't want to spend $85 on an amiibo of Mario.
I'll see you gotten old and responsible.
Indeed.
I do have to
Something
admit
like
that the 8-bit Mario amiibo was tempting for a moment. I don't even have a Nintendo console. It's just, that was the Mario I grew up with.
Right.
But
that makes sense. Nostalgia.
Mm-hmm. But I didn't buy it.
But then there's also a minigame challenge mode, or minigame madness mode, or something like that, where that it's just a whole bunch of minigames back to back, and it sort of scores everyone on like a point system, and the more you win, the more points you get to determine a winner. And it's got like a little shop, but I mean, you earn. It feels so weird to say this, but you earn like I think they're called Mario Party coins, for playing and completing games. And I'm not sure if it's somehow based on your performance or the place that you get when you actually finish the game. But you can go in the store and spend the coins to unlock stuff. And I mean, it's fine. Like, again, it also feels weird to talk about this, but after playing it as much as we did, I've unlocked almost everything in the store, especially all the big stuff. Like, there's additional characters, which I've gotten all of those, and I've got all of the skins and poses, or no, they just call them outfits and poses for like picture mode, so I can play dress up with my Mario characters and make them do different poses. There's a couple of things that I'm missing. There's some like bonus soundtrack stuff that you can get to just listen to, and some bonus artwork, which, I've kind of saved those for last because I don't care about those as much. It's just playing the game. But, and then there's also boss fights. So every time you play through the standard game, there's a mini boss that's halfway through, and then a final boss. And these are these interesting cooperative, but also competitive mini games that you're working together to defeat the boss by, in classic Mario style, jump on his head or making sure he gets shot by bullet bills or something like that. So you're working together to make that happen, but you're also still trying to beat the other person because you get different star rewards for whatever level you achieve against the boss. So it'll do things like, there's one of them where that you're fighting, what is it called? A cheap, like the really big fish monsters from the underwater level of Mario, like a giant one. And so everyone
I believe
has
that's
got,
just called a Jeep.
but everyone has got 3 green turtle shells that they throw at him. And every time somebody hits him, he goes, he rotates and he looks at the next person. So, it's cooperative in the sense of like, well, you want to use all of your turtle shells every time to do maximum damage and finish this guy off really fast. But also, you want to make sure that you kind of maybe save 1 or maybe 2 of your turtle shells to get him off of you if your opponents twist him where he's facing you. So, stuff like that. Again, it's not too complicated. My kid picked up on it pretty quick when we got that one, but each map, I'm not sure exactly how many maps there are. I haven't counted them. It's something like 8, I believe. There's, they've got a theme. One of them's like a theme park that is also Mario themed. One of them is like an underwater level that looks maybe like it borrowed pretty heavily from Zelda, specifically Ocarina of Time. So there's different ones. They each have, again, mostly just cosmetic flair for the way that your vehicle looks and the way that the dice sort of show up and move around on the board. So, and each map does have at least one unique thing. Like the underwater map has this eel that brings you treasure if you land on the eel treasure chest spot. So, yeah, overall Mario Party 10, I enjoy it quite a lot. The thing that is the most annoying about it is that party system where that everybody's riding around in the same car. That gets old quick because it's like, oh, but I want to go over there and try and get the thing, or shoot for like a specific space or grouping of spaces and just hope I get it for whatever's there,
Don't maybe turn this car around.
So, I find that a little bit frustrating, but also, it is helpful to have guaranteed shorter games because everybody's going at once and things like that. So, I don't know. I like it, but I like it a lot. But there's a few things that sort of frustrate me about it. But yeah, I mean, unless you have any questions or comments or anything.
Not really. I never really played the Mario Party games. I played a little bit, but not full party. And depth enough to really go beyond the kind of the meme, I guess, for lack of a better term, that it's the game to end friendships.
Yeah. It definitely is. This one is not as bad about that as older ones that I've played, because there's no stealing mechanics. There's no you can't take coins from other players because coins not even a currency. There's just mini stars and then the regular stars, which are used to determine the victor. Whoever collects the regular star basically wins, because it gives you so many points on your overall score. But yeah, that's not as much of a problem, what you just mentioned. So yeah, Mario Party 10, very enjoyable, great for kids, good enough for adults too.
Well, that's a ringing endorsement.
10 out of something, because it's Mario Party 10, but it's definitely not a 10 out of 10 game.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed it's not Mario Party X.
That would be good. But alas, there's an alternate universe where that exists.
Just wait till they get to Mario Party 30. Then I guarantee they won't use the Roman numerals.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion about games we played. I need a quick break.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think I need another cup of tea because I ended up talking for a lot longer than I expected.
Yeah, you talked for about as long as I figured you would. But that's okay.
Not sure how I should take that.
I know you very well and how likely you are to talk about things for long periods of time. So,
especially when I'm grumpy about something, because I ended up talking more about Dauntless than I did anything else.
Let's actually do the show, because it's 10 after 11. Get through it. Okay. So moving on to our first news topic of the evening. A loot box ban bill to be introduced by U.S. Senator Josh Hawley. And then we've got an article piggybacking off of that, talking about Sweden investigating loot boxes. So
yeah, it's more loot boxes. I mean, but the bill in the U.S. is a really interesting one because it's not just loot boxes like the title says. It's also going after pay-to-win mechanics and actually targeting mobile. That's why I find this so interesting. Because, okay, loot box ban. Big whoop, we've talked about this before, but going after the pay-to-win mechanics in mobile? Really? That's a pleasant surprise, actually.
Yeah. What pleasantly surprises, well, at least just surprises me about it, is that it's a Republican senator who proposed this.
I mean, I'm not at the point where I think all Republicans are bad. It's just that it's so easy to label it because so many of them just fall in line with a few dickbags in the leadership of the party.
Yeah. I don't believe that all Republicans are bad, just like I don't believe all Democrats are good, but you have to prove to me that you're not bad. I'm not going to give you too much benefit of the doubt. Like, if you show me something that's good, I'll be like, okay, that makes sense. I can believe that, at least in this one area, you've got, some good sense or the people's best interest at heart, something like that. But yeah, I was surprised when I read that because I was like, I don't know who this person is because he's from Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw, Republican senator from Missouri, and I'm like, okay. And whoever it is on his staff that wrote this, the proposal, like, they know their stuff. It's pretty short. Let's go ahead and read it. It says the most abusive
press release.
The press release from them. So the most abusive of such practices are pay to win. Pay to win games take two forms. In some cases, designers engineer games with artificial difficulty curves to induce players to spend money on upgrades simply to progress. These games are often offered for free, enticing players to download and even offering them a false sense of progression upon initial download before artificially increasing difficulty to induce compulsive purchases. In other cases, designers create multiplayer games offering players who purchase paid upgrades competitive advantages over other players. And then the second bullet point, loot boxes. Loot boxes incorporated both in free and paid games offer players randomized rewards for spending money, combining the addictive properties of pay to win with the compulsive behavior inherent in other forms of gambling. So the way that that's worded makes it at least seem like that someone or a group of people on that team did their homework. Or maybe they're, gamers themselves, so they've got firsthand experience with it. I have no idea. Gaming is much more mainstream than it used to be.
Yeah, gaming is a lot more open, especially if you clump in mobile gaming, which I've joked about, mobile gaming before, but at the same time, I do play my mobile games. I mean, I played one for this week, and it's a lot more prevalent, both of these in mobile than it is mainstream gaming, at least for now. So someone that, even just goofs around with something like Candy Crush, they're going to notice very quickly, oh, wow, there's a lot of payroll and mechanics in this.
Yeah, which Candy Crush is full of them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just the Blast Match 3, is that the proper term for it, are full of those pay-to-win mechanics. And that's one of the most casual and most grabbing games out there until you get to something like like Pokemon Go or something that's it's not even walking simulator, it's walking encourager. Maybe we should make that the genre name, walking encourager.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But anyway, I do think that just because how open it is in the mobile market, that's why we're going to see, I'll be shocked if this doesn't pass, which, it is a toss-up just because of just how utterly stupid U.S. politics is these days. I think we're just going to see this come up again and again and again until if something like I always hate the names of these. The Protecting Children from Abusive Games Act. That feels so manipulative, doesn't it?
Yeah. But, that's how a lot of this legislation is directed. Oh, we have to save the children.
Yeah. Well, also, the fact that if you vote against it because of some article in it or something that you don't agree with, especially,
then you can say,
especially if they add
you
something, an amendment to it, because, that's how, the Patriot Act is a good example of that. No, not counting the whole, how rushed it was to get through in the first place, but voting against something called the Patriot Act, really?
Yeah. So I guess it's been about a year.
Yeah,
the
Hawaii
last
one?
year the Hawaii one. I remember us talking about that and saying,
it was with Battlefront too. So.
Yeah, but I remember us talking about that and saying, this is going to get the ball rolling. Doubt this first one will pass.
A little over a year, February 13th, 2018 is the Polygon article. And that's about ballpark of where all this starts.
Gotcha. But, I remember us saying something along the lines of, like, we doubt this one will pass, but if it's happening, here in the States, then this is going to start to become a larger issue. And, here it is already. A Republican senator from Missouri felt either strongly enough about this or his constituents felt strongly enough about it that he's deciding to propose, something. And the fact that it's, in just 1 year has gone from Hawaii to Missouri, I think speaks a lot to how much traction this has
jump
gained.
Parties.
Yeah, and jump parties. Speaks a lot to how much traction this has gained. And when it comes to stuff like this, the United States is pretty difficult to get any sort of consumer protection or any sort of
we'll be talking about that
consumer
later.
Rights.
But the flip side of this, and I alluded to this before, that once a law gets on the books, it's hard to get it pulled off. And no, I'm not about to defend loot boxes or pay to win mechanics, but I'm a little concerned about amendments to these bills, because the ESA is a big lobbyer, so if they pass something that pretty much just blunts the teeth of this, it's going to be it's a feel good law and that's about it. Or on the flip side of that, if a hugely anti-gaming politician adds something that makes it so that any game that could be considered to have pay to win, even though it may not be, which once you get to pay to win mechanics, that's also starts to get kind of a blurred line, because what constitutes pay to win? Are boosters pay to win? Obviously, buying a one Infinity Sword is pay to win. But what if they word it where cosmetics could be considered pay to win? What if they could have it where just space, to use the Warframe example, if you want to stretch it to the absolute extreme, even though Warframe's a kind of a bad example because it's not directly PvP for most things, is having the option to buy additional character slots or additional bank space, essentially considered a pay-to-win mechanic. It all comes down to how it's worded. And that's why I'm a little leery, and I'd much rather have the game industry regulate itself, but they've shown time and time again that they're absolutely incapable of it. So that's why I'm pretty sure it's going to have to come down to rule of law, and that also does make me have pause, and that does concern me, because once it gets to the point where it's on the books, it becomes a lot harder to change it. And we also have found that the games industry will try to skirt around and be absolutely scummy when it benefits them greater than a fine would. So, that's why I'm not ready to take this as a victory yet, but to having it be another step forward. And it all comes down to what one of these laws is the one that gets through. Is it going to be one that has a sensible wording like this? Or is it going to dictate pay to win in a very broad term and make it as about as useful as the ESRB's a paid microtransaction label?
Yeah, you also run the risk of getting too specific as well.
Yeah.
There's a certain point where that specificity makes it much easier to have loopholes, because you can be like, well, the law specifically says
if it has
XYZ.
If it has a roulette mechanic or a slot machine mechanic, well, certainly everything has a bingo mechanic.
Yeah.
Or it's like a hand of poker. Or, pull another random casino game out of your ass, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll actually be able to explain the rules of Baccarat so I could understand it.
The one time loot boxes did something good. So, I mean, I give this... I don't think that this is quite the point of no return yet, although if it's not, it's very close.
Well, also, the FTC is still holding the public workshop. And I still remember the ESA figureheads trying to talk their way around loot boxes before, which was hilarious. I'm sure that there's going to be some fun, little sound bites out of that public workshop.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you're fine. But anyways, I think there's still a chance, be it a very slim chance, mostly because of the fact that the ESA and the ESRB specifically in the United States and the other parts of the world where they cover, like, I just don't see them actually doing anything except, sort of fighting it with their lobbyists and things like that. But if this has gone to, the South and jumped parties, I think that this is sort of a sign that the days of an unregulated video game industry are numbered.
Which I still remember the violence in video games hearings. I didn't watch them myself, but I grew up hearing about it and looking back on it and seeing how the games industry was constantly trying to throw each other under the bus to make themselves look good. So I honestly don't think. Boy, this is going to probably be taken out bad out of context, but I don't think the games industry has grown up enough where they won't try to do that again if it comes down to it.
Yeah.
I mean, this was Sega and Nintendo that were trying to throw each other under the bus. Imagine what happens when more scummy developers and publishers have a hand in it. Can you imagine the argument EA is going to try to make?
No, because whatever I imagine, they're going to figure out how to make it way worse.
Yeah, Blizzard just asked, don't you have phones?
Indeed.
Which is not a good argument in this case.
No, it's not. But
it'll be interesting to see just how things go. And also, it really comes down. This is a press release. This is not the bill. This is not even a rough draft of the bill. This is essentially a call to action to try to push towards some sort of resolution on this. So we'll have to see how things go. Especially, like I said, modern politics in the U.S. has gotten way dumber than I think anyone could take credit or could believe if they're not actively following it. So having something rather common sense and somewhat sane sounding is a rather nice breath of fresh air, but I don't expect it to go anywhere just yet. But I do think, like you said, this is a sign for things to come.
Yeah. Mixed feelings. Mixed feelings.
Feeling conflicted. But yeah, we also have, we didn't really talk about it, but Sweden also chiming in to investigate loot boxes. So, they didn't investigate it before, did they? So this is a new one, right?
Yeah, I don't remember them investigating it before.
Yeah, it would be nice if that link actually worked, but it doesn't. But not a lot going on here in this article. It's just speaking on behalf of the industry, we welcome this initiative. So this is the I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce what either that person's name or what they're the spokesperson of.
The Minister for Public Administration, Ardalan Shekarabi. But that's definitely wrong. There's got to be like an umlaut or something that should be there. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. They instructed the Swedish Consumer Agency to review customer protection measures for lottery or casino-like elements in games to ensure that they are significantly protecting consumers, particularly children and young adults. But on behalf of the industry, we welcome this initiative. This is... I have no idea what this guy's supposed to be. We agree that it is the consumer protection issue rather than a gambling regulation, as some have suggested. This is the game industry in Sweden, by the way. I'm not willing to try to tackle that pronunciation. And welcome and support the guidance in protecting the consumers. The industry has, of course, already taken action in light of criticism, though the introduction of new indicators in the age rating system and in Sweden, we are in the process of starting a scientific advisory council on the responsible game design, not limited to business models. Boy, that sounds a lot better than the ESA just slapping it contains microtransactions on literally every game ever, right?
Yeah. Contains in-game purchases or online purchases or whatever it was that it said.
A label that is by design absolutely pointless. Mostly because it doesn't even indicate what it is. It could be, it could just be a cosmetic. It could be that shiny sword. It could be the shiny sword with
DLC also counted.
Yeah, DLC. It was anything that could be bought. I believe the indicator was anything that could be bought within the game itself. So practically any game that has DLC that's came out in the last 5 years, especially on Steam, because I know a lot of games that has an option to buy DLC, and all it does is it opens up the Steam overlay and it goes to the store page. Well, that triggers the flag for the ESA.
Yeah.
So, a nice change in a bringing of common sense. I think that's something that we could all use a little bit more of these days. Agreed?
I agree wholeheartedly. So, next topic?
Next topic.
A new Final Fantasy VII Remake trailer shows Aerith, Sephiroth, and action combat.
Aerith. They're going with Aerith now? Isn't it supposed to be Aerith?
I think it's supposed to be. I don't know if that's a typo or if they changed it.
I'm kind of joking because the North American version is Aerith. But then again, the North American version of Final Fantasy VII, it actually has a pretty bad translation on it. A shockingly bad translation when you start going into things. I started watching a speed run from Games Done Quick from 2 years ago. It's kind of become my background noise if I'm not wanting to watch something that's actively, I have to pay attention to. I'll put on a game that I know somewhat well, a speed run from Games Done Quick, because they usually have some pretty good, behind the scenes knowledge or some sort of little quirk about the game. And they were talking a little bit about the debate between the two, but also talked about how bad the translation is. On one of the opening bosses in Final Fantasy VII, it was the Scorpion tank. They mistranslated the hint that you weren't supposed to attack when its tail was up because that's when it counters. But because they mistranslated it, they said, attack now that the tail is up instead of don't attack now. And they were talking about how many times it killed them when they were a kid.
That's interesting. Sucks, but it's interesting.
And it's just one of those things, looking back at it and hearing them talk about it, it's like, wow, they did rush that. But then again, this was also before JRPGs. I can't really say made it big in North America because, the previous Final Fantasies, Chrono Trigger, sorry. Chrono Cross is the PlayStation one. I always confuse those two. And, all the very popular JRPGs on the Super Nintendo, but Final Fantasy VII was the first one that was essentially mainstream in North America. I remember the commercials on TV that, it was just the FMVs playing. It gave no idea what the story was or really even what type of game it was, if I recall correctly. but that brand awareness, right?
Yeah.
So this has been a call to remaster the game for ages. I mean, ever since like the PlayStation 2 era, people have been calling for a remake of Final Fantasy VII. It's like the beloved child of the Final Fantasy series. And I believe it was the PlayStation 4. They did a kind of a teaser to show off the graphics. And one of the scenes that they used was the opening train sequence from Final Fantasy VII, which, got people all frothy again. Well,
yeah.
Then they announced, okay, we're going to do a remake of Final Fantasy VII. It's going to be episodic. And then they showed nothing for years. And now we have a new trailer. And it's showing that it's going in kind of like the Final Fantasy 15 route, where it's all kind of real-time active battles instead of the traditional turn-based mechanics. And also there was people calling it racist because of how Barrett talked. Did you have you heard anything about that?
No. It didn't sound racist to me, but honestly, I wasn't paying super...
he sounded a little Mr. T-ish, which maybe it's me, but that's not quite how I pictured him talking, especially with the manner of text that he used. But, I imagined him in a similar voice like that.
I actually did the same playing it. Not exactly Mr. T, but sort of close to it. Same voice, similar inflections.
Especially
just a lot less of like, I pity the fool.
Yeah. So, hearing the characters talk, especially, this isn't the first time we've heard this cast of characters talk because, the Final Fantasy VII movies, they have voices in that. But this is kind of just a teaser for the E3 announcement because they talked about, well, we're going to find out more in June at E3 with Sony. So this is, I'll be actually shocked if it's not a timed exclusive on PlayStation at this point. Just with how Sony is heading this. But it looks like it's still going to be episodic, which is a bit annoying, but at this point, I think they're kind of stuck into that, which episodic games is kind of died out for the most part.
Yeah, it's just the...
Life is Strange.
Life is Strange. And that's really the
Life
only
is Strange
with Telltale gone.
I would say some of the indie story-based games, there was The Council, I believe it was. That was also episodic. That was pretty recent. But, there's not a lot of episodic games, so seeing that is a little bit weird. But also, like we talked about ages ago, Final Fantasy, especially the PlayStation 1 era, has natural story breaks in where they change the discs. So if they base it around that, that actually makes a lot of sense if they want to try to get the first portion out early. But at the same time, who wants to play a portion of a JRPG?
Yeah, not me. I mean, one portion at a time until I pass out and then start up again once I'm not passed out anymore.
Well, I hope you saved before then.
Yeah.
I will say graphically, it's rather impressive looking, though. They went with
It does look good.
Yeah, they went with a fairly realistic look, which for some characters, it's a little bit off-putting, especially Cloud, because they have to give him the spiky hair. It's like, how much hair gel does that guy use, right? That's why the planet's dying. It's not, the Shinra Corporation sucking out all the life force. The ozone layer is gone because Cloud's used all the hairspray in the world to get the spiky look, right?
Yeah, that checks out.
But it's going to be, we'll see during E3. But this is one of those kind of morbid curiosities I have just because this has been going on for years now, just the remake, let alone, just the fandom of Final Fantasy VII, which I'll come out and say is not the best Final Fantasy on PlayStation. Because Final Fantasy IX exists.
Yeah, we've had this discussion before. I'm extremely partial to Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah, which you're allowed to be wrong.
So are you.
But I'm not.
on some things, but you are on this.
Yes, I know you are on this.
I know you are, but what am I?
But that is one thing that's nice about the Final Fantasy series, is that because, well, each group of games is kind of its enclosed thing, that different people have their different preferences for Final Fantasy, so it's not a series that caters to just one audience. Well, that's not entirely true because JRPG, but you could have a favorite that's catered to you a little bit more because you may like the draw system, or I may like the more fantasy theme.
Yeah. Choices.
Yeah,
Yay, choices.
This is going to be interesting to see just how this turns out. I'm still aiming kind of low on expectations, just because.
Same.
Just because of, it feels like this is going to be running on a lot of nostalgia.
I'm worried they're going to take out a lot of the stuff that made Final Fantasy VII so good too.
Well, they
try and streamline.
Well, they talked about at one point on the previous remake, because this thing has gone back to the drawing board at least once, and it's gone through a complete remake. They talked about removing the red light district area. Remember when Cloud has to cross-dress to try to save Aerith or Aerith at one point? They talked about cutting that out or streamlining it pretty strongly at one point. I'm not sure if that's still going to be a thing. I just wonder if they're going to have DLC so Aerith doesn't die. Oh, spoilers, by the way.
On a 20-year-old game. Yeah. $2.99. Save her from Sephiroth.
That is one kind of thing I miss. All right. This is going to be the old man portion of the show. I kind of miss the old gaming rumors.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking, I remember all of the things they said you could do to save her.
Yeah, all the rumors about how Aerith would be able to be brought back even. And that was kind of fueled by this one particular glitch. Like I said, the Final Fantasy VII North American release, at least, or I should say the initial one, because Final Fantasy VII saw like 2 or 3 major re-releases before the greatest hits version, which was another full patch. This was, back before you could just download the patch and be up to date. One of the scenes in the church where where her flower garden was, it would sometimes glitch out and you would see essentially a ghost of her for a split second. And that fueled so many rumors of all the different things you had to do or could do. Or another one was like the old Pokemon games, that one truck.
Yeah, I remember actually trying to do that with that truck, realizing it was garbage, and then getting getting mad.
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of miss, because a lot of what modern gaming is a lot of data mining and a lot of trading back and forth of very specific information. Like, well, the speedrun I'm watching, they actually figured out how the battle system works, or the random encounter system works. It works on a step counter. So they've actually pathed out how many steps you need to do to get fights on certain areas to be able to learn certain skills or to avoid certain fights. To the point where at some points they intentionally walk to either raise or lower the step counter, which is fascinating, but at the same time, it kind of removes some of the mystique of the game as well.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But part of me also wonders if they're going to try to include some of the, kind of the rumors and stuff. There's a lot of possibility on this, but it's this is also a remake and not a remaster. That's also, I think people just want a remaster, and the fact that they're changing it, I think, is going to put off some people. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think it will too. I think it'll put off a lot of people.
Hey, something to look forward to at E3. All the bitching.
Woo!
Oh, don't worry. I will contribute my share. but likely not directed towards this. Directed towards something else that's not on the docket today.
Indeed. Okie dokie. Moving on to our next news topic, we're going to talk about court stuff again. The U.S. Supreme Court says Apple can be sued for monopolization. So this is another one of those cases. Well, this one, it doesn't directly have to do with gaming just yet. But the Apple is in a class action lawsuit for the high prices and things. They were
in a class action for the walled garden.
Yes, the high percentage cut that they get. App developers and people are saying that in order to compete, or not compete, in order to make money, they're having to raise their prices too high.
Yeah, so, their charge is 30%, by the way, which seems familiar, doesn't it?
Indeed, it seems like a certain a Valve for letting off some steam. But anyway, so while this doesn't at this point necessarily have to do with gaming, gaming does stand a chance to be affected.
Well, no, it would be affected because it's the walled garden app store, so it would be affected on the mobile side of things directly. But you're also looking at the fact that this could impact consoles. This could impact. I don't think it would impact PC gaming as much, but there is a chance because it depends on how they determine the phrase walled garden. Is any game store where the product tied to it, or is tied to that particular store, considered a walled garden, or any store that has an exclusive? Because if so, every store that doesn't sell exclusively third-party games is considered a walled garden. And yes, I am including Steam on that. I'm including Epic Game Store, Origin, Uplay, all of them.
Yeah, that definition of what a walled garden is going to wind up being is the interesting bit. Because if it does happen to be just an exclusive title, then everyone is kind of in a bad way. Because every platform holder has exclusive titles. Even on PC, each, as we see more and more companies, developers, publishers, whatever, sort of spin off of one or a few major marketplaces to create their own, then they're bringing essentially exclusive titles to their, air quote, walled garden. So if it's just defined by exclusives, I think everybody's screwed. I couldn't imagine them doing that because, although, I'm not a legal expert or anything.
Well, it also depends on just how tech-savvy the Supreme Court is.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't imagine them doing that, though, because if you think of, compared to sort of brick-and-mortar stores, they can have their own exclusive items or self-produced things that they sell that don't fit under the same sort of clauses. But, I mean, the digital marketplace is a wholly separate entity, so, it might help sort of with the initial thoughts about it, but we can't necessarily use that as precedent.
But, well, they could also take the more hardline stance where Apple makes it's not impossible, but it's damn hard to install third-party apps without using their walled garden. So there is a possibility that, we're diving a little too deep on this and, we're panicking when we really shouldn't be. But, prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah. And expect something sort of in the middle somewhere.
That's still kind of shitty.
But I mean, yeah. But it was an interesting topic, just how could this potentially affect gaming?
I mean, it will no matter what affect on the mobile side of things. At least for Apple users, of course, because, I looked into that a little bit because I've never really used an iPhone. I had absolutely no interest in it. So I've been Android the entire way. So I had to look into it just a little bit, and it's rather absurd. And that's, not counting jailbreaking, of course, because, then that's its own thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge reason for why I don't like Apple products. I've had to have a couple for school. When I was working in my master's program, we had to have iPads or iPhones. I've had one for work purposes, and I hate how constricted they are, among other things. There's a lot of stuff I don't like about the iPad and iPhone line, pretty much across the board, just their sort of basic design philosophy. But, on the software end, like, I can't stand how locked down it is. And even if I'm not super likely to use, something that they deem, whatever, unsafe or just hasn't coughed up whatever money they demand, like, it's just frustrating.
You'd rather not drink your verification can?
Yeah, I'd rather not drink my verification can. Thank you very much.
Yeah, someone just discovered a certain story, by the way.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Don't know how I've missed it over the years, because according to you, it's been around a while, but...
Oh, yeah. Pretty much every time some draconian DRM came out, that made the rounds again. That's why I'm a little shocked that you never saw it.
Well, it happens.
But yeah, I just like Android just for the flexibility. Plus, I could run pretty much anything I want. To be fair, that's also kind of a downside as well, because I've had apps that just refuse to work properly because my phone is too new now, or before my phone was too old.
Right.
Or there's stories quite often about just key loggers. There's stories about Bitcoin miners. There's stories about just phishing attempts through apps. There was actually one I saw just last night. This was more of a proof of concept for the new Samsung Galaxy line, but there was someone that figured out a very particular flaw in the One UI that could actually soft brick the phone. That could be just installed onto an app, and anybody that's running a Galaxy S10 is kind of screwed in using it. To be fair, it's more of an annoyance than anything else, because you have to reboot the phone, go into safe mode, and delete the little app. But there's still that niggling. What if there's something worse out there? But at the same time, I'm not beholden to whatever a bunch of suits with turtlenecks decides I should be using.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a few pros and cons to each side, but I just prefer having the choice. I'm knowledgeable. I can figure it out. I'm experienced with, all things tech pretty much. So I like being able to sort of figure it out on my own, have the flexibility to do what I want.
Yeah, I have to admit that the Galaxy line of phones feels a lot more robust than the iPhone these days.
Oh, yeah. The Galaxy line of phones has been more robust than the iPhone for a long time.
I know, I'm comparing flagship to flagship, essentially, in that, but even the lower-end Android phones, they feel a lot more feature complete, outside of just, little things here and there, so that's why I'm kind of, on Apple in general, but the fact that, we're looking at this now on top of the loot box bill is an interesting time for gaming.
It is indeed.
Yeah. And it turns out we are living in interesting times in both gaming and politics.
Dark times, but interesting. So, are you ready to go talk about our final large topic, which is situated technically in Community Corner?
Yeah, I think so. Let me just
All
have
right.
a cough drop.
Well, you pop that cough drop while I chat up what we're going to be doing. We're going to scoot on over to Community Corner, just to put this here, because Jim submitted us this video a couple of weeks ago. Not quite exactly 2 weeks, but a couple of weeks.
Well, on release day, it'll be 2 weeks. He sent it to me on the 3rd, and I sent it to you, I think, on the 4th, and we decided together on the 7th that, maybe we should watch some of the responses to this, because there was a lot of arguments in this that felt like they needed to be more thought out. So I went to our favorite copyright attorney and watched his stuff on it.
Leonard French. Let's just take a minute, though.
I think we should thank Jim for sending this in first, even though it did take us a couple weeks to get to it. But it's more we wanted to be prepared for it.
Yeah. So the video titled "Our Games as Service Fraud," which was produced by or created by Accursed Farms, is a very lengthy. The video is, I think, 1 hour and 17 minutes long, or something like that. It's well over an hour.
Well, he doesn't say "are." He says "Games as Service is fraud." There's no question on it in his mind.
Yes, I guess is fraud, because games as service would be singular because it's an idea, essentially, and I'm calling it a plural just because games as service. But whatever. Whatever. Grammar, syntax. I'm bad at that. But anyways, it's a very lengthy video exploring from sort of a layperson's perspective the legal side of it to the best of his knowledge and research, and then giving examples and talking through, trying to sort of dissect this idea about them being fraud. The first, 20, 30 minutes of the video discusses the legal definition of fraud.
He goes into what he considers games as service for the first 15. Then I would say a good 15, 20 minutes is just the legal definition of fraud and going through different posts on various sites and various law definitions. And that's where I kind of had a problem with it, is that he is going a little overboard on that. Now, I want to come out and say this before we get started. I am not defending games of service here, but I do agree with Leonard French on this, and I realize I'm also jumping the gun on this, that fraud is a very specific term in a legal case. And calling them fraud is a little bit of a misnomer. Anti-consumer, I think, would be a lot more poignant and also more powerful. But, yeah, fraud is a lot more sexy.
So, I also am not a lawyer, obviously, not a legal expert. I don't even play one on TV.
I did watch a Leonard French video, and I do play it, and I'm staying at Holiday Inn Express at some point.
But this is interesting. I don't have, exactly a diametrically opposed view to you, but I do agree with him a lot more. And maybe this just comes down on how sort of I approach, people's feelings being very legitimate and a way to help guide the way you approach the world. But, I mean, games of service do oftentimes feel like fraud. It does feel oftentimes like you're being sold, a bill of goods or an incomplete, product that is never delivered upon. And I think some of that is definitely set up by nature and the way that they're designed to run on forever, with no definite end of life or end of life plan. I think some of the things that Accursed Farms says in the video do seem kind of unreasonable. He talks about end of life plans specifically and how that it's very easy to set up, and he had a conversation with one developer, according to him, who said it would be very easy to set up these sort of end of life plans, put out some kind of code or something that someone could stand a chance of recreating a server.
Yeah, which
I think that oversimplifies that issue.
Well, not just
and
oversimplifies, but also because he's talking to a potentially a singular person. Let's face it, a lot of the games as service out there are in the double and AAA markets. And the way gaming is built these days is through intellectual properties and copyrights. I think we could both agree on that one, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, end of life plan. Let's pick on Warframe again, since that's the one I'm most familiar with, and that's the one that I have the most investment in. Let's say Warframe announces tomorrow they're shutting down in a month. Well, according to his plan, they would have to have some sort of end-of-life plan to put out a code to be able to reasonably rebuild Warframe, or the server-side portion of it, which is not as much as the Division, which is what he kept going to over and over again, or the Division 2. But we don't know exactly what intellectual properties or what licenses is involved in the netcode and in the server architecture, or the AI or the loot systems or anything. So we're making a lot of assumptions here that the developer even owns the items that he is calling for him to have to be able to release. And I think that's the important point here, is that intention is good and all. And, maybe that one developer is right in that, for certain project, it is, a couple hours or a day's worth of work. But it's not an overarching statement. And for some developers, it may just be the fact that they would love to, but they literally cannot because they don't own the license to the netcode or to a certain aspect of the game that is required to make it function. They don't have the license to distribute that, so they can't.
Yeah, and depending on something else that wasn't really covered, I don't think that he covered, was the code or the server architecture or whatever might also be part of someone else's intellectual property, or patented in some way. They can't just be released under sort of like a trade secrets type of clause.
I mean, he did
there being
cover
serious
that
ramifications for the people doing that.
He did cover a little bit, saying that, it shouldn't be a problem if the other games that they work on use a similar thing, because hackers may be able to reverse engineer it because they should have security, which sounds incredibly simplistic.
Right. Well, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. Just
I know.
If...
That was the only time he really ever covered the back end of gaming. Yeah, the stuff hidden under the hood, the engine, the netcode, and everything else. But that was the only time he ever really covered it. Was that, well, they shouldn't have to build their. They shouldn't be building their games where getting that information out should damage future titles anyway, which is incredibly simplistic.
Yeah. So, I mean, one game that I do have experience with this, which I've talked about on the show fairly recently, is Perpetuum, which was developed and published, right? An MMO developed and published by a team, a company, whatever. So they owned all of that stuff, and they released all of it after the game died, and it still took a dedicated team several months to recreate the servers. And they, they're supported on Patreon. They're not technically making money off of the sale. It's, donations to, keep them like server costs and stuff like that. But, it took a team of people who were, this is what they did, several months to recreate the server. So there's definitely a lot more, not to belabor the point too much, but there's definitely a lot more potentially on the back end that could be involved at any developer's level. So more than just a day, or, a few hours or a few days worth of work potentially. Mm-hmm. But a lot of I keep having to go double check my notes because for some reason I can't remember his name. Accursed Farms. A lot of his arguments did come down to what I felt like were very emotional stances. Like, I feel like this doesn't match. He doesn't specifically say this, I don't think. Like I said, there's a lot of video that I'm trying to recall here. But a lot of what he said at least came across as like, I feel like other people are being taken advantage of. I feel like we're being lied to. And that certainly can feel like fraud. And maybe, going back to the heart of this, like, between two individuals, you could say, hey, you defrauded me. And it would be acceptable, but you have to prove something a lot more concretely in a court of law. And getting around to what Leonard French was talking about, essentially to prove fraud, you have to prove that a company or an entity, malicious intent, they knowingly lied, they knowingly deceived you.
Which then you start getting into AAA gaming. You start to maybe have a point on the marketing side of things, but. I think the reason why I'm kind of more caught up on the legal definition of this, even though, once again, I am not a lawyer either, or a law expert, is that getting caught up on the wrong definition and going to the wrong area prevents you from fixing it. This is a consumer rights issue. This is a consumer protection issue. And going into those areas and making those laws more robust, doing the consumer protection or actually having proper consumer protection in the United States would go a long way towards fixing this issue in the United States. Fixing fraud, especially with how the game EULA is designed, and the fact that they say right on the box that the game can be shut down at any point after a certain period of time, technically does not make that fraud. Is it scummy? Does it feel wrong? Yes, but on a legal standpoint, they have the high ground, as much as that sucks. So that's why I'm kind of caught up on this, is that Leonard Fritsch actually had he didn't use it as an analogy, but I liked it, so I'm going to borrow it. It's like this carnival coming into town. The carnival says that they're only going to be in for so long. In this case, it's going to be the carnival's in a town for as long as it's profitable. All right, so it's not a set amount of time. Whenever you buy a game, you're buying a ticket to go into their carnival and to play their games. When the carnival is no longer making enough money, they leave town. You still have your lifetime pass that you bought, but because the carnival's left town, you no longer have access to it. Did the carnival defraud you when they said, we're going to be in town for as long as it's profitable? And in the fine print of when you bought your ticket, it says, we have the right to leave town at any point with a 30 days warning. Is that fraud? Legally, no. Does it feel scummy? Well, that's when you start getting into the kind of the, should companies have to keep live service games up when they are no longer profitable, when it's actually costing them money? But, we're getting into some dangerous territory there to try to legislate.
Yeah. Ultimately this would have to go to court, and perhaps multiple instances would have to go to court for how, different live service escapades, let's say, have played out. I think there might be more of a case for certain things than for others. It would be difficult to prove no matter what, just because you do have to prove a very high burden, or you do have a very high burden of proof to show fraud. And I do agree with you that it is, I think, much more of a consumer rights issue than it is it's all legal, but, fraud is a different avenue. That's more criminal intent, more malicious intent, as opposed to just maybe more negligence or taking advantage of a system or something like that. It's all scummy, but, one of them is much more malicious in nature. So,
and one's also a lot more easy to prove, because fraud is a very narrow definition for a reason. Because it carries a very stiff penalty if it's found to be true.
Yeah. So, I don't know. There's not really a good, clear answer for this, except, if it ever goes to court, then I guess we'll get some sort of answer there about, how they're going to interpret the legal definition of fraud when it comes to digital goods and services.
Especially a service that can completely change. Not just shut down, but let's use World of Warcraft, for example. The 1.0 version of the game, the launch version, is completely different from how it is today. WoW's gone through several very massive design changes over the years. At what point would it be considered a different enough product that a court of law would say that it's fraudulent because it's no longer the item that was sold? A little bit of a gray area and a little bit of a dangerous area, because it could shut down MMOs if it goes the wrong way.
Yeah, I didn't even think of it that way. That would be interesting, though. To me, that feels kind of like a car, like a Ford Focus has been in production somewhere for more than 20 years. But what model specifically defines a Focus? Because they're different every year. But I don't know, that maybe is a little bit too much apples to oranges comparison there. But that feels similar. I mean, a whole new set of law eventually. Like, at some point, just has to be like, okay, like, we've been trying to sort of legislate around digital goods and things for decades now, but we really just need to sit down and hammer some of this stuff out. Like, at some point, that's got to happen. Somewhere. Which sounds nebulous, like I'm not trying to be, like, sarcastic about it. Like, it does have to happen at some point somewhere, but I don't have a looking glass into the future. I don't know where it's going to happen or when. But I don't think this is the sort of thing that's kind of going to evolve over time. Because it hasn't really evolved much in 20, 30 some odd years that digital goods have really existed. There have been some things for sure, like the DMCA in the States for all of its issues. I know that there's similar, like I'm not nowhere near as familiar with laws in Europe or anything like that, but I know that there are similar laws in the EU and other places. So, but those all feel like band-aids instead of actually dealing with the real problem.
Yeah, and
or issue.
Yeah, and he also went into the whole perpetual license versus how things actually run these days, where what are you actually buying? Are you buying the experience or are you buying the client? And that's something him and Leonard French went on and on about, actually. Which was actually a little frustrating that they got caught up on that, because it was interesting to hear them go back and forth, but it felt like Accursed Farms at times was kind of grasping at straws, trying to hold his argument. When Leonard French was focused on, like I am, the legal definition in order to be able to properly address the problem. Because if you, like I said, if you focused on a fraud issue, well, that's going to be a very narrow window of games. He used the example of if Battlefront 3 came out, ran for a day, and then suddenly shut down, and everybody that was on the dev team, skip country. That would be considered fraud. But that's also more of a breach of contract because of how the EULA is usually written out. And even the fact that if something isn't considered covered by the EULA, there's a doctrine, and I'm blanking on what he called it, and I really should have taken notes on that, where it's essentially the general practice of the industry dictates anything that isn't covered. So the general practice is essentially a 30-day notice. Refunds are a general practice. Usually there are exceptions to that. But because those are the general practices, they're considered kind of the unwritten contract, for lack of a better term. Does it suck? Yes. But once again, fraud is not quite where we're going at here. That is more breach of contract. That's anti-consumer. And that's something that's a lot easier to prove and a lot more likely to go through in a court of law.
Yeah. I mean, my brain is going in so many different directions at once, and I'm tired. It's not helping. A lot of this does come down to, which, we've kind of already said, but the specific nature of how law has to be written and interpreted, and the fact that we don't have any legal precedent for this, really, at least in the digital gaming realm, and certainly not connected to games as service. But it's an interesting argument, the layman's perspective versus a legal perspective.
There was a CAD software license that Leonard French was talking about, where they wrote into the EULA that was non-transferable. And the company that bought all the licenses shut down. Well, the guy that bought all the licenses from that company and was selling them on eBay was sued and lost because of how the EULA was written. Now, can the EULA write away all your rights? No. But at the same time, the EULA is what's kind of dictating this argument here. As much as that sucks, it comes down to just how anti-consumer is probably not the proper term, but lack of proper protection the consumer has in the United States. And that's what we're having to deal with here is a consumer that's kind of, left out to dry a lot of times. And it's up to the company to be upstanding. And we've already talked about how the ESA is less than so. Which I realize, they don't dictate the laws, but they are the lobbying arm of the gaming industry.
Yeah. There's also something sort of how Accursed Farms, I felt like, was arguing was that there should be no, and maybe this was just, I interpreted this in a way that he didn't intend, but I felt a lot of what his argument was that there should be no risk, no chance for anything to ever happen, and I lose my product. But there's a certain amount of risk that has to be assumed with everything in life. And that's just come across kind of like a platitude. But that's just the truth of the situation. And in the United States, in particular, as a consumer, you have to be aware that you're taking on more risk than someone in Europe or Asia, potentially. I don't know what sort of consumer protections that, say, South Korea has. But I would imagine that it's probably better than the United States. Just about everywhere is better than the United States in that front. But, there is always going to be a certain amount of risk that goes along with it. And consumer protection laws and things like that can help mitigate some of that risk from gross negligence, incompetence, or potential fraud and things. But, at the end of the day, there's still always going to be some risk that you will lose your product or your possession or whatever. Like I said, I feel like in some way he was coming across like, oh, we should just make this where it's no risk. No, it's win-win for everyone. I'm grossly oversimplifying some of his arguments, but some of the stuff that he was throwing in there was kind of coming off a bit flippantly and had been like, well, of course, if we just do this, everything would be fine.
Yeah, it's something I came across as, that's not probably as strongly as you, but that's why I kind of brought up the whole, at what point can a developer shut things down, especially if they don't have the rights to implement the end-of-life plan that they want to, or he wants them to, I should say. And also, different games have different backends because there's the fat and the thin servers, where a game like The Division 2, since he was so hung up on that, the game server handles the heavy lifting. It handles, I'm making assumptions here, but let's go for it. Where the game handles all the loot rolls, it handles all the AI. All the client's really doing is interpreting the data from the server and drawing pretty pictures and taking your input and sending it to the server to play the game. Well, on the flip side, you may have something like Warframe where their servers are the login servers, matchmaking, and chat. And it's considered a stronger client. Well, the plan would be very different between the two of them. And not as easy to just say, okay, well, you just have to do this, and this. Well, it may cover a game that requires a less lifting by the server on something like Warframe if it's a weak documentation requirement. But then, you get something like the Division 2 where, okay, that's nice. You have a netcode. Good luck figuring out everything else. But then you come across where, okay, well, you have to give us all the information. Well, trademark, bitch. Right?
Yep.
Or what about, the next iteration, where the Division 3 may use the same netcode, or it may use the same AI infrastructure. Well, you've just given away that information, so it makes hacking a lot more likely. Not saying that hacking is not going to happen anyway, but you're handing off a lot of information here, and I really think he's being unrealistic. And I think that's why I'm so caught up on this, and why I felt at times that he was making the emotional plea is that I wonder just how much he realizes that he was making such sweeping and large requirements of the gaming industry, where it has to be this and nothing else. And I got that especially whenever I was watching the Leonard French video where he was going back and forth with French, where he would basically just scoff off a lot of the legal terminology and just say essentially, and I'm hugely paraphrasing here, that it still feels wrong. Well, yes, it may still feel wrong, but it's not in the legal definition of fraud, and you're arguing with a lawyer.
Yeah. I do believe that he was being very genuine. That is Accursed Farms.
Maybe,
I think he's being very genuine.
A little bit naive then, which sounds very dismissive of him. But
I don't think naive is the right way to say it. Maybe, but he seemed more like he was very impassioned. And something that you see with a lot of people who have a passion for something is that they will, sort of bullheadedly pursue their goal, whatever it is. In this case, this games as services fraud thing, oftentimes to evidence that either proves the contrary or something that, someone who wasn't quite as passionate might, take pause and consider. So I don't think he's necessarily, he's definitely being genuine. I don't think he's necessarily being naive or that he's doing it on purpose, like because he's an asshole or whatever. Like,
I wasn't accusing him of that.
I don't get that sense from him. No. I'm not saying that you were, but I'm just kind of taking this out to the next step, its potential, sort of conclusion. But, I don't think he's necessarily even being an asshole or whatever. He just, that's the way he sees it, and he's so almost entrenched in his view that it's very difficult for anything to break through that, even a strong counter argument from an actual lawyer.
Yeah, I would suggest if nothing else, if you want to see something interesting, is go watch the Leonard French video that will be in the show notes. It's going to be the 2 hour and some change one. Around the 1 hour mark or so, he brings in Russ, which is Accursed Farms. And because he uses a Discord overlay on his live stream where he talks to people, it's essentially a podcast. You could just scrub back and forth until you find Russ on screen. So it's very easy to find when he joins in. And listen to some of the argument back and forth, because it is very interesting, just the layperson versus the lawyer. And just the difference of definition. Because I think that's where a lot of this it comes down to. It's just the difference of definition. Where he is calling something fraudulent, it becomes consumer protection issues. It becomes breach of contract. It becomes anti-consumer issues. Are they the same issues? Yes. And is it a different label? Yes. But they have different recourses. And because he's so caught up on that sexy term, yelling at the top of his lungs fraud, that he's missing the forest for the trees here. He has someone on his side, but he's so attached to just wanting to call something else that he is not really discarding an ally and someone that could potentially help him, but he wants to make it. He wants to fight the fight like he wants to. least that's the way I took it from listening to the back and forth. And I'm not saying he's not wrong on some of his points. I mean, does it suck that a game can shut down? Yes. But I'm looking at more of a historical context of not being able to preserve games, of not being able to enjoy that game that I enjoyed years down the road. But you're also looking at these games that are built around massively multiplayer experiences as well. Something like The Division is a very lonely experience if you're playing with no one else on the server, let alone your party. So, it also comes down to the right to repair that he went on to for a bit, talking about the reason why the developers should have to release the code, essentially the key to the Enigma code, as he called it, is to have a chance to repair the game for your personal use. Who has the knowledge to do that? Because once you get past a single person, that starts to get beyond the right to repair. And we've seen a lot of companies. I mean, we just talked about City of Heroes. I keep saying Company Heroes because it's the same initials. We saw City of Heroes get smacked down, and they talked literally about this issue of still running the server even though the game shut down, because they knew they would get a cease and desist because it's a public thing then, and it's not quite under the right to repair argument.
Yeah. Going back to what you just said a second ago about, having to rebuild, repair code, whatever. Like, how many people could do that? Not a lot.
And I'm not even talking about, just getting a server up and running. Because we're talking about AI algorithms. We're talking about loot tables. We're talking about netcode to a server. We're talking about a lot of highly specific knowledge. A lot of specialized knowledge. And even in the company themselves, I'd be surprised if there's one person that's able to do all of that. And the people that built the damn thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wouldn't expect one person. Even these small one-person dev teams, I suspect that they would use a lot of basic stuff that they could acquire.
Yeah, which comes back around
instead of having to write it all from scratch.
Which comes back around to the licensing argument. I mean, let's just pick a game almost at random. How about Stardew Valley? If I recall correctly, he actually had help with the netcode to be able to make that game multiplayer. So even a small one-man development team, he licensed out the multiplayer aspect of it. I mean, that's not quite the same because that's not a live service game, at least by Accursed Farms' definition, which seems to hinge pretty much solely on always online. But it carries the argument that even a small one-person dev team doesn't have the knowledge to build their game completely from scratch on a peer-to-peer multiplayer service. And using Steam's multiplayer network is supposed to be really easy. Or at least easy to people that have the knowledge to do it, because I'm not about to say, well, I can do it. No, I can't. I wouldn't know what to do. I think you would have better luck with putting a monkey in front of a keyboard.
Yeah, I'd be also lost. I could learn with enough time and some good materials to teach me.
Yeah, but there's one thing that prevents that.
What?
Your laziness.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Have we exhausted this topic?
Oh, well, we've been on it for a bit, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
I'm not sure if there's anything else to really cover. I mean, in principle, I do agree with them on certain points. But his end game, I think, is unattainable, And I think that's...
yeah.
And I think that That doesn't bring down his whole argument, but it does put a fatal flaw in his argument where he seems unrealistic that he will not give up on this more emotional based decrying of games of service, even though he's trying to win a battle while losing the war.
Yeah, it's a good way to say it. Trying really hard to win this battle, but overall is giving up on the war or losing the war.
Yeah, which I think it just really comes down to we need better consumer protection in the U.S.
Agreed. 1,000% agreed. Better consumer protection in the U.S.
Plus Ultra?
Yes. Well,
before we go, I think we should thank Jim once again because we got a lot of mileage out of that.
We did.
We had no idea how long we'd be talking about that, but I think we got some really good points on that one. So thank you, Jim, for sending that in. And if you wish to send in another topic for us to talk at length about, even though we may spend some time to get boned up on the subject, and some of us may study it as well, you can do so VGLpodcast@gmail.com with your letters, voicemails, game-related topics, or just tweet them to us, VGL Podcast, on the Twitter.
Yippers. So, looking at the time...
Yeah, I was thinking you're about to turn to a pumpkin, so I don't think we're going to be hitting any music this week.
Indeed.
Which
doesn't
hurt my feelings because that makes the show notes a little bit easier. Or, in my case, usually a lot easier because I tend to have better discovery cues.
You do. You do indeed. But I still can say, hey, Rage, hit them with those socials.
Well, since I've already given the email, I've been Caffeine Rage. You can find me over on the YouTube, Gaming with Caffeine Rage. You can find me on the Twitter, Gaming with CR. And maybe someday you'll find me over on Twitch, Caffeine_Rage. And you've been?
I have been Gaming Psychologist. You can find me on the YouTubes by searching for Gaming Psychologist. You can find me on Twitter at JMA4707. And if you don't be my friend on Steam, you can just send a friend request to JArthur4707.
And, of course, the password for this week is verification can, because it can't be anything else. And kind of ties in, doesn't it?
It's oddly fitting, or it's odd and it's fitting. So yeah, oddly fitting.
Yeah, if you never read the verification can story, it's a 4chan story, but it's not grossy or anything like that. But it's kind of a dystopian gaming future, even though it's not the past because it's set in 2018. But yeah, definitely worth checking out if you've never heard of it. But something else that you've already heard is our email. So let's just skip to the Patreon, patreon.com/VGL podcast. And if you was to join our lovely patrons, they pay for our Podbean account. VGLpodcast.podbean.com, which hosts the show notes, which if you wish to get the Leonard French video and not have to search YouTube for it, you can do so right there. Get links to all our stuff. Join the Discord, or you could find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or your podcatcher of choice. Our intro and outro music is On the Ground by Kevin McLeod, and you can find his work at incompetech.com. And
as always, as his lovely music starts to roll across my voice, bye-bye now.
See you next time.